Good evening, I'm Paul Authodds, and it's time for your Royals postseason report. None of today's games have finished yet as of this recording. The Royals are 3 games back of the Guardians for the division lead, and now 3.5 games ahead of the Twins for second in the division and the second wildcard. As of this recording, here are your Kansas City Royals playoff odds. Baseball Reference, 98.7%. Baseball Prospectus, 98.9%. And Fangraphs, 98.4% with 18% odds to win the division. The Royals' magic number for any playoff berth is 7. We now return you to your regularly scheduled Royals Rundown podcast. Good evening, everybody, or morning, or afternoon, or whatever time of day it is. Yes, I am Jeremy Greco, and this is the Royals Rundown podcast. Glad to have you all here. Sorry, Jacob could not be here today, but while the cat's away, the mice will play. And so I have invited back fan favorite. No, his name is not Craig. It's Greg Walker. Greg, how you doing today?
I am great. It is a pleasure to be here pinch hitting for the glorious Jacob Milham. I am thrilled to be back on this podcast. It's been a little bit, yeah, but I do appreciate you. You got my first name correct, which that's a rarity right there. It's amazing.
Is it? Yeah, a lot of people calling you Craig.
A lot of people do, actually. Yeah, I did get into the habit when I was in college of every time I was drinking, I'd introduce myself as Craig, and so it's kind of my own fault, really.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sounds like your own doing. So, for those of the people out there who maybe are new to the show since you were last with us, you also co-host another podcast. Bat flips and infield shifts. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, you can listen to that wherever you're listening to this. Most likely it's on all their regular podcast streaming services. We had an episode this past week, which if you're listening to this podcast, you're obviously a fan of ball. And so if you want a bit more of a broad perspective of the whole league as opposed to just Royals coverage, tune into that. We go into off the field stuff as well, because sometimes interesting things happen, such as, I don't know if you saw this a couple of years ago, MLB announced a partnership with a company called Distill Brands International to be the official vodka of MLB.
Okay.
2 years later, as far as I can tell, they haven't actually sold a product. And so my co-host Brendan did a very interesting deep dive into trying to figure out what this company actually is. This is the alleged official vodka of MLB. So yeah, tune into our most recent episode if you're into that kind of thing.
I'm going to have to check that out. That sounds interesting as heck. I know for a while the umpires were wearing that FTX patch, the official Bitcoin exchange of MLB or whatever. And that obviously didn't work out very well.
Yeah, that's gone belly up, just like the whole metaverse thing that MLB was really getting into as well. Haven't heard about that in a little bit.
Oh, well, I'm sure they'll come up with AI here in a couple of years after that's thoroughly died. But yeah, so I'm glad to have you here, Greg. I almost called you Craig. I don't know.
Wow, unbelievable.
In the air. The Royals are currently playing as we're recording this. They're down 4-3 in the middle of the 6th inning. Salvador Perez just with a weak fly ball after Bobby walked home a run. So don't know if they're going to win today. The Guardians are also winning. Don't know if they're going to win today. But, it doesn't matter that much. As much fun as it would be for the Royals to win the division, I think we're all just very excited that they're basically guaranteed to go to the playoffs at this point. If you were listening to Paul at the beginning, 98% and above, everybody says the Royals are going to the postseason. You wrote recently an article, and me and Jacob have talked a lot about playoff rotations, and I haven't actually had a chance to read your article yet, but give us some of your thoughts.
Well, so I was breaking down how should the Royals set their starting rotation for the postseason, and obviously there is a lot that goes into it, but look, the starting pitching is really the strength of this team, and so I think how you order it does matter, at least to some extent, especially depending on if we're assuming they're going to be in the wild card series more than likely. I know there is a chance that they get that first round bye and go straight to the division series, but most likely we're looking at a best of 3 series. Probably on the road, although I did see today they're only a game and a half behind Baltimore for that first wild card now, so that's actually in play in a way that I didn't really think was going to be.
Baltimore's losing to the Tigers as we're recording this, or they've already lost. Maybe let me check that.
So that first wild card is in play, so it's something to monitor. But anyhow, the starting rotation, and so there's really 2 big decisions they need to make in terms of starting rotation, because I think who your 4 starters are going to be, 4 starters, assuming they get to the DS. I think who your 4 starters to be is kind of going to be set in stone. Like, to me, it's going to be Cole Reagan's, it's going to be Seth Lugo, and you're going to have Brady Singer and Michael Wacha. And then to me, like the A team almost is like Reagan's and Lugo, and the B guys is like Reagan's and Lugo, and then Singer and Wacha, right? And so game 1, do you start Seth Lugo or Cole Reagan's? Like, to me, that's one of the interesting questions. And then to me, it's like game 3, do you go with Singer or Wacha? So I lined it up personally in this order: Reagan's, Lugo, Singer, Wacha. I think there is a strong case to be made, though, to start Seth Lugo in a game 1. And I think there is also a strong case to start Michael Wacha in a game 3. So, let's start with those top 2. If you're taking Seth Lugo or Cole Reagan's in game 1, how are you feeling?
I mean, either way, I feel pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
Lugo, the interesting thing is that Reagan's obviously has the better stuff. He gets the strikeouts, but I feel like he'll get 10 strikeouts and give up 2 hits, but one of those hits will be a home run. Whereas Lugo will give up like 5 hits, but they're all singles, and he spreads them out. So you're good either way.
Right. It's hard to go wrong. And so I don't really think there is necessarily a wrong decision there, but obviously you're going to pitch both of them one way or another, right? Game 1 and 2 in some order, but you obviously prefer to start out with your best foot forward. So you put your best pitcher in game 1 in theory, although I don't know how to weigh the fact that Seth Lugo tends to work deeper into games. Like, if you want a guy that's going to give you 7 or 8 innings, it's more likely going to be Lugo. That said, we don't really see starting pitchers work deep into games in the postseason anymore. And so I'm very curious as to how that's going to play, because the bullpen is such a liability for this team and the rotation is a strong point. And so I'm curious if we're actually going to be seeing them ride starting pitchers deep into games in a way that we just really haven't seen from postseason teams in recent years.
Yeah, I certainly hope that they're willing to really push the starters, because they basically have 2 relievers, I think, that they can definitely trust. They have a bunch of guys that you might be able to trust. It depends on whether they're in a hot streak or a cold streak right now. I wrote on Twitter the other day that I felt like the biggest problem with the Royals bullpen this year has been that everybody in it has been in the circle of trust for good reason at some point. And it's like, as soon as they're firmly in the circle of trust, they completely implode and they can't find their footing again. And now you're like, well, now who's in my circle of trust? And you just can't ever have a true circle of trust in your bullpen. So I hope that they're willing to really lean on the starters. The other thing that I think is interesting, so you talked about 4 starting pitchers there, but the Royals have 6 guys who are kind of starting pitcher-esque. You left out Michael Lorenzen and Alec Marsh. And so even if you're not willing to go too deep in the game, I think that adding those guys to the bullpen should help. Certainly should give you some length if somebody like a Cole Reagan's only goes 5 innings, or a Brady Singer only goes 5 innings or something like that.
Yeah, those were the 2 guys, Lorenzen and Marsh, that you just mentioned, that I had in there. Is like, they're not one of your 4 best starting pitchers, but they're still going to factor in some way. I think they need to, absolutely. So I'll get back to those guys in just a moment, but let's say you start Lugo and Reagan's in some order or another, games 1 and 2. You lose one of them. So now we're going to a winner take all game 3. It's probably on the road. It's most likely going to be against the Orioles or the Yankees or one of those teams. Do you go with Singer or Wacha? Because this is really tough for me, because Singer gets more ground balls and he also misses more bats than Wacha does. And so, especially if he's pitching in Yankee Stadium, I think I do like that matchup a bit more than Wacha. At the same time, though, Wacha has been excellent in the second half of the season this year. And so if you're riding the hot hand, he seems like the guy. He does have postseason experience, which Brady Singer doesn't. Now, granted, most of his postseason innings were in 2013 as a rookie. And so it's been a while. His last 3 postseason starts have not gone nearly as well as an amazing stretch that he had as a rookie. But nonetheless, there's the experience factor. So I'm torn. I did have Singer over Wacha in the rotation, but I'm not married to that idea. It's a tough call for me.
Yeah. So the way I look at it is that Michael Wacha has a sub-3 ERA since the beginning of May, when he added that slider against the Angels. So that's most of the season at this point. Sub-3 ERA. He was really bad before that, which is why his overall ERA is so high. Well, and even then it's not high. It's just high for the Royals starting rotation. Meanwhile, Brady Singer, who I was counting on to get his 10th win any day now for a month now, has a 5.4 ERA since the All-Star break. I'm honestly not sure I want him in my. I'm tempted to go with Lorenzen in my playoff rotation as the fourth guy. At one point, I've argued that Singer should go against a righty-heavy lineup and Lorenzen should go against a lefty-heavy lineup. But watching Singer again today, I thought day game, and it's the Pirates. They strike out a lot, so he should be pretty good. He didn't look good today, and he's again not going to get his 10th win as he's been pulled here in the 6th inning with the Royals currently losing. So even if the Royals come back and win this one, he's still, I mean, and pitcher wins don't mean a lot, but it's when a guy can't get a pitcher's win for over a month, you're like, that doesn't feel good. So I'm definitely, I don't think there's any question for me. I'm going Waka in that game 3.
Right, and that does make sense. And you mentioned kind of the matchup aspect of it, if you want Brady Singer going against righties. And we're talking about Michael Wacha. His best pitch is that changeup. And so even though he's a right-handed pitcher, he is theoretically a better matchup against a more lefty-heavy team. And so that definitely plays into it as well. If the matchup is the Yankees, they're not exactly a lefty-heavy team really outside of Soto. And so that does change things versus if they're playing the Orioles or the Astros or whoever they might be playing. So I can see you being right here. I would not be surprised if Wacha ends up being the game 3 guy, but there is just a few other things going on with it that had me lining up Singer. Although I will admit, since I wrote that article, the last 2 starts the Singer has made haven't been the most inspiring. And so I get where you're coming from there. As far as, Michael Lorenzen as well, he mentioned, he was really good for those few starts he made before going to the IL, right? But it was kind of smoke and mirrors. Like the peripherals were not good. It was like a 4.6 FIP or something. Yeah. In addition to that ERA that was under 2, and now he's on the IL. And so I think he could have probably built himself a case to be in the playoff rotation if he had stayed healthy. But the fact that he's been on the IL for the last month, I think that kind of takes him out of it. I'm curious to see how they deploy him though, as well as Alec Marsh, because Alec Marsh looked really good in a start this weekend. The dude can miss bats. And so I'm curious to see what he can do in kind of a multi-inning relief role out of the bullpen. I think he could really do some damage back there.
Yeah, and he pitched as a bulk man last year and also was just like a multi-inning reliever. He was kind of doing a little bit of both. And he was very effective in that situation as well. I mean, they talked about he's bad in the first inning, but he was just really good out of the bullpen, regardless of whether you think he has first inning troubles as a starter or not. So I think there's that. And also worth pointing out that Lorenzen appears to have had a setback after his most recent rehab start. So it's not clear, is he going to be healthy for the postseason? Is he going to be healthy for a potential wild card series where he probably wouldn't start in the wild card series anyway? I do think that you're looking at Wacha or Singer for that. And I think you're right there. So it's interesting. I almost think right now that what I want to see from a playoff rotation is some combination, Lugo Reagan's at the top, and then Wacha 3, and then kind of a bullpen game, which I know is scary sounding, but kind of a bullpen game for the 4th game. But that bullpen game is some combination of your 3 guys, Lorenzen, Singer, Marsh, where you're just like, hey, whoever I choose to start, you're going to pitch 3-4 innings. You're not going deep into this game. I'm piggybacking someone with you. So unleash everything you got because you're not in this one for long. Seth Lugo, you can go 7-8 innings. If you think you can pull it off, if you're out there and you're nailing it down, I'm going to let you keep going. But, let these guys just really unleash their stuff with a piggyback start in that fourth game. Any thoughts about that? Does that seem reasonable at all?
Yeah, on its face, the idea of a bullpen game with this particular team's bullpen does sound horrifying. But when you consider that you also have Lorenzen and you have Marsh and you have a few of your starting pitchers that can also operate there, that does make it a bit more palatable. And so I could see that being a game 4 situation. I've seen a lot of people suggest throwing Brady Singer out of the bullpen in a game 4 in the postseason. And I mean, I don't like that just because I don't want to change a guy's role that substantially going into the postseason. He's always been a starter, and the mentality, the preparation, everything that goes into being a reliever is just fundamentally different. And so I don't want to stuff him into a new role going into the postseason. So, one other thing to kind of keep in mind as well, though, is that a lot of these starting pitchers are getting like already past their career high in innings for the most part. And so I'm just like, are we going to see these guys start to run out of gas in October? I mean, Seth Lugo is pushing 200 innings when he was a reliever for most of his career. Like Cole Reagan's is way past what he did last year. Michael Wacha is as well. And so some of the monitor, like they look fine right now, except for Brady Singer, I guess, so far here down the stretch. And so I'm just curious, hey, Seth Lugo, you're in the postseason. You've thrown 210 innings this year. Like, is he still going to have it? And obviously, we don't have any way to really know that. It's just going to be wait and see. But, it's just fun that we're actually able to talk about this in September for once, as opposed to staring down 110 losses.
I've been writing for Royals Review since 2016, and I haven't gotten to talk about a potential playoff rotation since 2017. So I'm like, yeah, this is the fun stuff. This is where you really get to dig into things. You make a good point of Brady Singer's never pitched out of the bullpen. Like, even if you think he can do it, is the playoffs the first time you want him to do that? So that makes me even more like my idea of, all right, Brady Singer, you're game 4 starter, but you're pitching 3 innings. You're not pitching 6 innings. You might pitch 4 if you're just like super on fire effective. You're just giving me 3. Give me 1.5 times through the order, and then I'm going to Lorenzen. I'm going to Marsh. I'm going to Lynch. Daniel Lynch has looked really good as a multi-inning reliever out of the bullpen. So you've got a lot of options, I feel like, to follow up Brady Singer. I just want to say to Brady Singer, like, don't try and stretch things out. Just throw everything you've got at these guys. Just prep like a starter, but just unleash everything early and don't hold anything back.
And that's also kind of just normally how teams have started using their rotations in the postseason these days, is because if you just look at postseason teams over the last few years, most of them don't have a 4th starter they trust to even pitch into the 5th inning. And so for the most part, yeah, by the time you get to that 4th starter in the postseason, most teams are either bullpenning it or sending a guy out there for 3 or 4 innings, then just hoping their relievers can cover the rest of it. And so that wouldn't really be a deviation from what teams in general have been doing. Although I will say it is a luxury that they even have a guy like Brady Singer that can be a 4th starter relative to what a lot of other teams are going to be running out this year in the postseason. With the amount of pitcher injuries there's having around the league, a lot of other teams are going to be scrambling to fill even their 3rd starter spot, never mind the 4th one. And so we're in pretty good shape. We're in pretty good shape from there. Although I will admit, I'm still terrified about the late inning possibilities because Lucas Erceg can't just pitch all the relief innings.
Oh, he can't? I mean, you got Chris Bubich, right? I feel pretty good. Chris Bubich has been electric. And I know Sam Long hasn't been great lately, but I still feel pretty good about him. After that, it gets a little dicey. Unless some guys. I know James MacArthur was your guy, but I want to throw up every time I see him pitching in high leverage these days. I'm so over it. The dude does not have it. I still believe in James MacArthur, but right now it's more of a 2025 James MacArthur than a 2024 postseason MacArthur, if that makes sense. I think that his problems are solvable. I look at his baseball savant page. There's a lot of good red on there. He gets a lot of weak ground balls, but honestly, what I'm reminded of when I look at MacArthur right now is I think it was 2016 Joakim Soria, or it might be 2017 Joakim Soria, where he all of the numbers said he's good, but except for the ERA, which said he gives up a lot of runs. And it was so frustrating every time we watched him pitch. And I feel like that's where MacArthur is right now too. And then Soria was good the next year. The Royals cut him, and then he was good the next year. And MacArthur's much younger. I think he's got better stuff than Soria had at that point. I think he'll be able to figure it out, but it's probably like an off-season activity. If MacArthur is pitching high leverage innings in the postseason, it's kind of I want to say this too. I did a little analysis kind of the 2014 postseason for the Royals. Everyone talks about how good the bullpen was, but that bullpen wasn't good. It had 3 ultra elite guys and then a bunch of guys you do not want to see pitch, including Aaron Crow, Tim Collins, little Tim, tiny Tim Collins, just all these guys. And you know what? And they had Brandon Finnegan, and they relied on Brandon Finnegan a lot, but it bit them in the butt on game 4 of the World Series that year because they were relying on a guy that they didn't really want to rely on. So I do think that in a similar way, this team can limit the innings that their relievers throw because you're like, Erceg, you're pitching every day now. I'm not giving you a day off because you've pitched 2 days in a row. You're pitching a 3rd day in a row. You're pitching multiple. You're doing because every game is must win now. is what ends up happening, right? So I think there's an opportunity, especially with this rotation, which I think is better than that 2014 rotation. I think that Lugo is better than Shields. I think that Reagan's is better than Vargas or Guthrie or, all kinds of guys. And so I think there's real opportunities for the Royals to do things here, but it's going to be really interesting watching Q manage this team in the playoffs for sure.
Yeah, and multiple other relievers outside of Erceg are going to have to step up because, especially if they do manage to get to the CS of the World Series, now we're talking about a longer 7-game. I think teams are really starting to catch on to the whole idea that when batters are facing the same relievers over and over again throughout a 7-game series, the reliever is not going to be as effective. Like, we've seen this with starting pitchers, obviously the whole third time through the order penalty. More teams are starting to realize, hey, we can't just have the same relievers facing the same batters for 5 games in this series because at some point the batters are going to figure them out. So somebody besides Erceg is going to have to be able to step up and really pitch some important innings. Now, whether that's Bubitz or Long, Hunter Harvey, I don't know if there's been any updates on his injury, but
they basically said we'll be lucky if he comes back. They had an update during the game today. They're like, he's with the team. He throws he throws. He does not pitch off of a mound. He throws. Just, plays catch on days he feels well. And he didn't even play catch today. So well, I'm not counting on Hunter Harvey again in 2024.
Well, that's a great trade acquisition then for the stretch run, but sometimes they just don't work out. But
yeah,
we'll see because the Rangers last year did not have a good bullpen. Like going into the postseason, their bullpen was rough, and yet they made it work because once you get to October, you just need a couple of arms to get really hot for a few weeks, and that can carry you the whole way through. So I don't know who that's going to be, but somebody's going to have to if this team is going to really make a run.
Yeah. So kind of on a related note, I was curious. The Royals, obviously in September, like every team, are currently carrying 28 players. Do you have any thoughts about who might not be on the roster come playoff time out of this 28-man roster?
Well, I mean, Lorenzen does come to mind as a guy that, depending on his injury recovery, if he can't come back in any meaningful way, it's a guy that they were definitely hoping to have that's not going to be there. But, is there any reason for Garrett Hampson to be on the playoff roster? He's been on the team the entire season, and so I guess so. But he seems kind of redundant, especially with, him and Adam Frazier. And we'll see if Yuli Gurriel actually hits enough to justify staying on the roster, because if that dude's not hitting, then he doesn't have any role. Yeah,
I've actually kind of wondered about Robbie Grossman. He's been the only waiver deadline acquisition the Royals haven't been super keen on playing. I mean, Tommy Pham has started every game. Yuli Gurriel has started more games than not. Grossman has 2 or 3 starts, and I know he's primarily here to face lefties, but it's just not working out, and he's not hitting the lefties either when he has played. I feel like he might be a guy to go. And the Royals are they're allowed 14 pitchers. They're currently carrying 13. So I've seen arguments that are like, oh, the Royals might only want to carry 11 or 12 pitchers, but which pitcher are you going to? I mean, you could unroster, James MacArthur, I guess, if you wanted to, and keep some guys around. It also, like you said, it also depends on, is Lorenzen back? Because then at least one pitcher will have to leave the roster for Lorenzen to get back on it. And I tend to think that Lorenzen is still an option for the postseason. I'm hoping his setback is not as bad. I mean, for one thing, Hunter Harvey's first setback was at the beginning of September, and then we didn't hear anything again for almost 2 weeks. He threw a rehab appearance on September 3rd, and then the Royals were kind of radio silent. And then finally today they were like, yeah, it's day to day, and he's not even pitching right now, not even throwing bullpen sessions. So that's why I'm out on him, but I'm hoping Lorenzen can come back, because boy, they could sure use just one more steady guy, whether he's a starter or a reliever. They could use one more guy that you're like, okay, I feel okay when this guy is on the mound.
Given the issues they've had with relief pitching this year, I don't understand how Evan Sisk hasn't gotten a shot in the big league team the entire season. I understand you have to find a roster spot for him, but I'm pretty confident he could pitch better than Chris Stratton out of the bullpen right now.
Yeah. And I mean, there's also Jonathan Bolin, who's looked really good. There was Walter Pennington before he got traded to the Rangers. There was Will Klein before he got traded to the A's. Pennington, by the way, has been up with the Rangers, and he's been pitching. Well, he's been kind of iffy, actually. He has a 1.84 ERA, which sounds really good, but a 5.23 Sierra. He's walking almost as many batters as he's striking out. So maybe the Royals were onto something with saying, yeah, that's not our guy. It's been really frustrating this year. And then, of course, yesterday, the Royals announced that, yeah, Chris Stratton's actually been hurting since May. And it's not like he was hurting since May and pitching kind of effectively. He's been hurting since May and he's been bad. Why didn't you just put him on the injured list? I don't like it. For the last month, you've only used him when you absolutely had to. So it's not like you couldn't have called somebody up and only used Steven Cruz or Jonathan Bolin or Evan Sisk whenever you absolutely had to. At least there would have been upside, and at least Chris Stratton could have been healing up. If Chris Stratton's ineffectiveness this year has been because he's been hurt and not because he's washed, then the Royals have really damaged their opportunity to have an effective Chris Stratton in the playoffs.
I just never know how to take those whole, this guy was just playing hurt thing. It reminds me of like when Hunter Dozier was the worst player in baseball a few years ago and was still playing every day. And then after the season, like, oh yeah, he was just playing through an injury. It's like, okay, well, he was also the worst player in baseball. So why don't you just put him on the injured list?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you have to wonder, like, is it an excuse or everybody's banged up? But at some point it's like, if I don't get it, like, either the player isn't talking to the team or the team isn't paying attention or both. Honestly, the team should be like, yeah, you're not playing well. What's going on? And if coaching isn't helping, then, is you as the team, you've got a whole staff of doctors. You've got all the video in the world. You should be able to figure out if a guy is injured.
Yeah, you would think the team, having this many resources, but, sometimes professional sports teams just do really funny things like that. And so if Chris Stratton has actually just been pitching injured for the entire year and that's why he's terrible, great. Doesn't change the fact that I do not want that guy pitching important innings in the postseason.
And that, unfortunately, was when we had technical difficulties that prevented me and Greg from finishing the recording together. Greg went on to talk about how the Tigers are kind of sneaky in the playoff picture. I went on to argue that I don't think so. I know they have to pass the Twins before they can pass the Royals anyway, so I'm not concerned about that. We talked about Tarek Skubal a little bit. He mentioned, I don't want to face Tarek Skubal. He's scary. I said the Royals beat him up the last two times they faced him. And then we went and looked it up, and we are facing Tarek Skubal. The Royals will face him Wednesday. Unfortunately, in the previous two matchups, he went off against Cole Reagans, and I feel a lot better in a matchup of Tarek Skubal and Cole Reagans. This time it's going to be Alec Marsh facing him. So don't know how that will go. I mean, Marsh was really good last time out, so it might be fine. We'll just have to wait and see. So that the Tiger series is coming up. I think the Royals are going to probably easily take 2 out of 3 of it. It would be nice if they'd sweep. It would have been nice if they swept the Pirates series. They might still sweep it, but they're down 4-3 as I'm recording this in the middle of the 8th inning. Just a very frustrating game. This would be a very different vibe podcast probably if I was recording it with Jacob and if we started after the game instead of in the middle of the game, as Greg and I both would like to watch the Chiefs game today. Royals are my first love, but we try and work with each other's schedules. And, one of the things I like to do with the Chiefs is I watch those games with my dad on video chat, and it's how we connect after I've moved out of my parents' house. So that's really an opportunity for me to talk to my dad. I promise you, I'm still very focused on the Royals. I still have lots of attention to pay to the Royals. This podcast wouldn't be happening right now otherwise. I don't know why I'm defending myself. You all know. You're all here. You've been listening for a while. Anyway, so one last thing I wanted to talk about, and this was kind of going to be my Royals review. Royals reviews. I don't remember how that goes. I thought about trying to talk about it with Greg, but it was kind of like iffy, like whether it was worth talking about in that way. So my review this week, I'll just call it my review for this week. My review this week is the Kansas City Star article penned by Vahe Gregorian about John Sherman, which basically posits this idea that that people maybe voted against the Kauffman Stadium replacement, the new stadium, the billionaire handout back earlier this year before the season started, because they just didn't know how generous John Sherman was. And it's honestly just a frustrating and in ways disgusting piece to me. Billionaires don't need coverage from respected sports writers. That's what they've got publicists for. I found the whole idea of the article irritating. Like, that's not why he lost that vote. Why are you framing? No one. Like, there was an argument in there that, like, people think that John Sherman doesn't really live in Kansas City and that he doesn't care about Kansas City, and you all need to know that he does. And I'm like, no one really thought that. The handful of people who kind of pitched that as an idea were shot down by anyone and everyone who had a clue and was like, no, he's big in Kansas City for sure. Like, he cares about Kansas City. I mean, one good thing that did come from the article is kind of the information that John Sherman is still only looking in the local area for whatever new stadium opportunity he's going to try and set up. So for those of you who were afraid that the Royals would move to Nashville or whatever, it's not happening. Or at least not anywhere close to happening. Some other stuff I took issue from. There's a line in there that there's the uniquely American spirit of philanthropy. And I gotta tell y'all, that is not uniquely American. Other countries do philanthropy. That it's a thing. I promise you it's a thing. And then also there's this idea that, oh, he's so generous. It talks about how in 2022 the LA Times wrote that he was worth $1.25 billion. And I'm sorry, if you're truly generous, and this is where no one's here to stop me. The mice are playing. If you're truly generous, you're not worth $1.25 billion. You can't be if you're truly generous. How do you get that much money if you're truly generous? You don't. It talks about how he's donated tens of millions in charitable donations, but the only number I remember seeing in the article of a donation he made was $2.5 million. It also talks about how Big Slick got $4 million in charitable donations, but those weren't made by Sherman. It was just made possible by Sherman, which is a completely different thing. And again, this man is worth $1.25 billion. And if he's tens of millions is not a specific number, if you want to really when I want to make an argument, I give you specific numbers as much as possible, because I want you to be able to know that I'm not fudging them. So when someone says, well, he donates tens of millions of dollars. Okay, what's tens of millions? You obviously want me to believe that it's like, 100 million, 150 million. But if it was that much, you would have said over 100 million, probably. So tens of millions could be as few as 20 million, which, yeah, that's a lot of raw money. But as a percentage of 1.25 billion, let me do the math on that for you real quick. $20 million divided by $1.5 billion is that's let's see, 1.3% of his net worth. And those of you who are good Christians out there, donate 10% to your church, right? You're tithing, and you might give more on top of that to charity. So, and let me be clear. I know there's always this argument, oh, that's his net worth. That's not how much he makes a year. Well, that's because billionaires don't work for their money. So we don't know how much they make a year. We can't talk about that number. We can only talk about what they're worth. And you can say, oh, well, that's what he has in assets. That's not how much raw cash he has to spend. But banks love loaning money to billionaires. So if you have that much net worth, it is really easy to get a really favorable loan from a bank, because they're not going to charge a billionaire much interest because they know they're good for it. They're just like, yeah, I'll give you money and I know I'm going to get paid back. Like, that's an easy, safe investment for a bank to make, so they don't make a lot of money on it. Whereas, if you and I borrow money, we're going to end up paying a much higher interest rate because they don't necessarily trust us to pay them back. Anyway, it's a pointless article that doesn't make sense and is frustrating in its sense of, like, look at how amazing John Sherman is. Now, I want to be clear. that John Sherman has been this year, outside of the stadium shenanigans, has been a model owner. Okay. He authorized general manager JJ Piccolo to spend money. There's the kind of famous story at this point of the Royals had an opportunity to trade Vinny Pasquantino for Jesus Luzardo, or they could sign Michael Wacha. And he said, no, sign Michael Wacha, spend the more money. And obviously I think that worked out. I think Wacha's been better than Luzardo this year. Let me look up those numbers, but certainly Vinny Pasquantino and Michael Wacha were better on this team than just Jesus Luzardo would have been by himself. Actually, no, Luzardo has not been good this year. He has also not been healthy. He's made 12 starts this year, only 66.2 innings, 5 ERA. So, that really worked out, in favor of the Royals. So yeah, he's been a model owner willing to spend on the team. I do question, based on how much he spent on rosters before now, how long this will continue. But also he does donate millions of dollars. Great. I'm glad he does. All billionaires do, but maybe he donates more millions of dollars than other teams. If so, awesome. Thank you, John Sherman. Way to go. But then again, I'm confronted with this idea that he could have avoided anyone needing to donate to charity by really working with the local community to do a really good community benefits agreement, as he was asking for this new stadium that guaranteed living wages for the employees in the area where the stadium was being built. And he chose not to do that. So there's just a lot of stuff happening here, and people are complicated, okay? There's good and there's bad to them. And a puff piece like this, that's just like, John Sherman's a really good guy. And it does say, he does right at the end, like, you have to decide, whether the Royals have made a good argument for you to spend this money. It does, I'll give Vahe that much credit. But the whole thing just smacks of billionaire butt kissing by the local Kansas City media for no real reason, unless, John Sherman, some of his charitable donations were like, hey, Star, be able to keep operating for a while. Here's some money. I don't know what's going on. I just know that the whole idea of this article was bad. It was bad because no one truly didn't. I cannot believe that a significant number of people voted against the stadium because they didn't think John Sherman was charitable enough. And certainly this is not the first time people have talked about how charitable John Sherman is and how much he gives back to the community. It's constantly talked about in Royals media, on Royals broadcasts, in all kinds of stuff. So this is not news to anyone either. Finally, I do want to go ahead and I'll do one more review real quick. Let's end on a more positive note. Fangraphs announced that they are going to switch to kind of a pay model where you only get a certain number of free articles a month instead of being able to read all their articles a month. Now, first of all, the most important thing Fangraphs offers us, I think, is access to the statistics. I think access to the statistics is the biggest thing, the most important thing, the best thing they do. I love a lot of their articles, but I'm constantly there for the statistics. I don't spend a lot of time reading the articles, maybe because I'm too busy using their statistics to write my own. But still, you're still going to have free access to the statistics, so don't get that twisted. Second of all, Fangraphs is an important service, I think, for baseball fans. They provide these stats in a way that I find much easier to parse than what I get on Baseball Reference, even if Baseball Reference's stats are sometimes more comprehensive. And so I'm just going to say that Fangraphs is worth it, y'all. They're currently charging $60 a month or not a month. Oh, geez. No, $60 a year. So $5 a month for an ad-free experience. I have the $25 a year membership that does include ads, but gets me access to all of the membership stuff. So that is something that you can absolutely have access to. And in the spirit of generosity, inspired perhaps by John Sherman, I would like to offer you all an opportunity for a free year's subscription to Fangraphs. I will, with my own money, I'm willing to purchase 3-year subscriptions to Fangraphs, ad-free subscriptions at that. So you'll have more access, better access to Fangraphs than I have. And all you have to do is be one of the first 3 people to DM me and say, can I please have a Fangraphs membership? And I will set you up. Okay. There's my charitable giving for the year. Hope you all appreciate that. I'm watching the Royals right now in the top of the 9th. Bobby Witt Jr. facing off against Aroldis Chapman. May he never pitch for Kansas City again. May he blow this save. Please, for the love of God, blow this save. This has been a super frustrating game. But even if the Royals lose this game, still in terrific position to make the postseason. And let me check that Cleveland game, as I'm gonna just continue to waste time instead of just like leaving here. Cleveland was winning last I looked, and yeah, they did win 2-0. So if the Royals lose, they'll be back to 4 games behind Cleveland. The division will almost certainly be out of reach. But hey, the wild card works too. Wild card works too. They've done well out of the wild card spot. Anyway, until next time, go Royals.